Gino's East is one of Chicago's most famous deep dish pizza places. They've been open since 1966. And there are still some people who don't realize Gino's East is here in LA now too. And let me tell you, it feels like you're in Chicago when you're in there. I know, I'm in there a lot. And during the week, Gino's has a happy hour from 3 to 6, Monday through Thursday. Get $5 drinks like Stella and Dark Horse Chardonnay. Also, $6 eats like spinach artichoke dip, garlic breadsticks, and a jumbo bowl of fries. There's so much great stuff on the menu. I always have a difficult time deciding what to order at Gino's. My go-to is probably the tavern pizza, cheese and sausage. You know what? Everything is my go-to there. Deep dish, the Italian beef, you name it. Everything on that menu is fantastic. Gino's East of Chicago and Los Angeles was named Best Pizza in the Southland by LA Times readers 2 years in a row. It's more than just a Chicago restaurant. It's one of the best restaurants in LA. Check out the friendly confines of Gino's East LA today on the corner of Coldwater Canyon and Riverside Drive, just off the 101. See you there.
Sit back and relax. It's time for peanuts, popcorn, and Cracker Jacks.
Hey, how's it going? I'm your host, Jeff Santo, and I'm here with my wife, Christie.
Hello, hello. So we just saw on the news that they are going to be implementing robotic umpires in the 2025 spring training.
Yeah.
To foresee if it's going to happen in 2026. What do you think about that?
I think it's going to happen. I like how they're approaching it, right? And we did find out some new information that they're doing because a lot of the gambling is really taking on its own.
Let's talk about this.
Well, no, I'm not going to get into that. That's just the way it is.
Oh, I'm going to get into this.
Okay, all right.
Okay, because I don't know. Am I getting to that age where I'm like
maybe?
I mean, because Bob Nightingale of the USA Today, he says that the reason they're doing this is because of gambling, which is totally freaking shocking that they're not doing it for any other reason. Because if they're doing it for the other, all the other reasons.
That's Bob's opinion, though.
Okay. But he might have some insight.
Whatever. I mean, Bob had a strong opinion there, but I think it's a combination. But go.
Okay. Well, what is this like future world that they're foreseeing, if that's the truth? Because if that is the reason, then I mean, I'm imagining like this Biff Tannen's Pleasure Palace from Back to the Future 2, where like, I mean, the future of baseball gambling is like a spectator's black hole where people aren't even watching the game because they're like in their seats gambling. I mean, and DraftKings and like FanDuel rule. I mean, next thing you know, like all the stadiums are going to be like owned by like gambling.
Oh my God, it's apocalyptic. That's not a good vision. But okay, I get it now. But I think the umpires are behind this because they don't want to get stabbed after a game if they make a bad call behind the plate that called third strike and that guy was in a situation that we've all seen plenty of times.
And that's the real problem.
Well, that's a problem. Yeah, that's a problem just in general. I mean, just the way that baseball is going right now, we all understand the strike zone because we see it every day. Okay.
Yes. Once they put that little box in there,
it's over.
It's over.
So you got to go with it. You got to test it out. I mean, I thought they'd bring it in this year because I'm sick of seeing some of these calls. Now, I did like hearing that they're gonna also do challenges for calls, which I think is a great thing because now I'm like, okay, they got a challenge. I think you get 2 of them, and if you're same thing. If you're wrong, you gotta you lose the next challenge or something. I don't know, something like that. But what it does is that in key situations in the 8th or 9th inning, when a strike could really affect you, called third strike or a ball 4 when it's a strike. I like those challenges. Mm-hmm. That makes sense to me.
Totally.
Those are great challenges. So they're talking about that with a robotic umpire. So that means the robotic umpire is going to get it wrong? I mean,
or it's going to be one of those like, no, let's talk about this because this is, as much as I'm learning about baseball, there's still so much to learn. And one of the things that I'm still trying to understand from you, which I still don't quite understand, is this like unknown rules for the like to stretch or shrink the strike zone depending on the pitch count.
I like that
No,
because
because you've talked about this. You're
have.
like, that should be a strike. And I'm like, but why? It was in the, it was outside, or, and you're saying, well, because the count was this. That makes no sense to me. It's either the box or it's not the box, but explain that.
Yeah, I understand how you think that it's either the box or not the box. That's also practical. But here's the thing. I think like what gets me so frustrated when these umps make bad calls is the counts.
You're off the subject. Answer the question.
The count. I'm going to answer the question. The counts. So 0-2.
Uh-huh.
If it's little outside but right there, hitter's got to swing on 0-2. So you're going to expand it. You're expanded because you should be swinging at anything off the plate, a little off the plate. You cannot take a called third strike right on the corner that might miss that box. It's strike 3 to me. Now 3-0, that's a ball, right? So 3-0, you shrink it because now the pitcher better put it in there, or you shrink it to what's normal, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it, because I think a lot of these umps are making bad calls. They're not preparing themselves for which I can't understand. It's their job.
I think you're ahead of where things could be, right? So if that's like some unknown truth that baseball players know, or is that your truth?
It's my truth. It's every ball player that gets up there that plays the game knows that, hey, man,
so
it's 0-2. I better protect the plate. Hey, man, it's 3-0. I better read right down the middle or don't swing.
Okay, so this is the baseballer's perspective. That is like an unknown rule within.
Unknown. Everyone knows it if you're playing the game.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so if this is a known rule to people who are playing the game, it's an unknown rule to the people who are, lower IQs or just basic people.
You're not a lower IQ. You just aren't as familiar with. I was born into it.
That's true. Okay, so if that's a rule, and we're not seeing the box on TV shrink and expand, so now maybe they implement this robotic ump, and then like 5 years into it, they realize, oh, we're missing out on the subjective call of the ump based on this strike count. So now we need to do these little minor expansions and adjustments within the box. And so you're ahead of where the AI is.
You're correct. Now you're right. So maybe they should just go by the box. Hits the box, doesn't. I'm good with that to start, right? I'm good with that to start because you're going to get some 0-2. Like things are just missing are going to be like, really, that guy didn't swing at that. So you might get players up there like they have such good eyes. Some guys do. Most don't, I guess, if you look at the statistics. But the ones that do, they're going to take that pitch on 0-2. Mm-hmm. So that might that might hurt them eventually too. I don't know. I mean, but hey, you're screwing with nature as far as like you're putting in a whole different system of how it used to be as far as the baseball nature of the game. Mm-hmm. So, but I'm up for it, man. I'm tired of and these umpires are probably tired of it because it's getting serious if people have a lot of money on the game. And hey, that's where the game's gone. I think the umpires, because it is moving in that direction, that we need to make changes like that and even some more changes. So baseball is changing the old way. It could be, oh, I love the ump. Well, you loved it when we didn't look at the box, okay, because we didn't know exactly if it was off or not. But now we're looking at a box, and that's been up there for years. And these umpires are probably getting a lot of crap thrown at them after games, not only because of betting, but even because of serious fans that know that some of these calls have ruined some games.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me just ask you really quick. How long has that box been on television? How long have we been seeing that box?
Oh, I can't, that has to be someone to mail it in. I'm going to have to say that box has been there for at least 15 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I might be wrong.
So you might be 15 years, that the modulating the box of the robotic
15 years later?
15 years,
yeah.
If it took us this long.
Well,
now, let me just also say, talk about changes that are necessary for the game and changes that there's the downsides of some of these changes. So, your dad's era where they only had, the two, and then the top ones go to the World Series, right? And then they modified
Well, that was in 69 it changed, and they got the divisions, the first divisions, East and West, in each league.
Right. And so now, we have all of these playoffs, and these playoffs keep changing, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like baseball really doesn't start until after the All-Star break.
Well, you kind of got a good point there, but we're excited to watch the beginning of it because we're waiting for spring and all that. But I think what you're trying to say is the long game of baseball isn't working so much anymore, right? So maybe they got to divide it up into halves.
It's a massive thing that the problem that they
because the long game worked before. You were satisfied that the best team is in the World Series, but then it's like all these other teams that are close and then once you did the division split and then it went to wild cards, now it's up to 3 wild cards. Yeah, you got to start doing some things differently for sure. Yeah. So, interesting stuff.
Great topic.
Yeah. Can't wait for spring training to see the robotic umpire.
Yes.
Now, this is a great show. We have one more show after this. This is a beautiful one. Tom Dreesen is my special guest, and boy, man, he's something else. His story is so powerful about believing in yourself and your purpose and going for it with every ounce of your being. You know, I was just in awe just listening to him. So you're gonna have a special treat listening to Tom Dreesen talk about his story. He's from Harvey, Illinois. You know, had a blue collar guy. Had a came from. It's another blue collar famous story. You know, from hardship to greatness and to a life that you can only dream about. So can't wait for you to hear that. And then my crackerjack call is to Karl Marquardt, who is running the Cubs fantasy camp. It's coming back. Randy retired, Hunley, and Carl and Tony kind of are starting it, and it's on. It's on in a big way in Tucson, Arizona in January, and my brother and I are going to be going to that, and it's going to be a lot of fun. They got a lot of great players, so you could check that out
at wavelandevents.com.
Yeah. They're going
/Northside baseball fantasy camp, or you can go to peanutspopcornandcrackerjacks.com and go to the links tab.
Okay, but Carl's going to talk about that. So that's a great conversation, and enjoy the show. Have you ever wondered how cool it would be to experience the life of a big league ball player? Well, at Northside Baseball Fantasy Camp, you'll enjoy the week of a lifetime, playing ball on pro-quality fields, being coached by and sharing a clubhouse with Cub legends including Fergie Jenkins, Jody Davis, Bob Denier, Sean Dunston, and Lee Smith. Imagine your first day at the camp at Northside. You enter into the clubhouse and see your locker with your nameplate and personalized home and away Cub uniforms, and then you see that one of your Cubs heroes has a locker right next to yours. No longer a fantasy. Your Cubs career is about to get real. At Northside Baseball Fantasy Camp, you'll stay in top-shelf accommodations and compete in a 10-game season that includes a playoff to determine the camp champions. My brother and I were on a couple of camp championship teams, and it got intense. It was great competition. And you'll have services of a professional training staff, and you'll need it, that's for sure. Plus a clubhouse attendant like the big leagues have. Picture yourself towing the rubber, facing Ron Say or Willie Wilson or Ron Coomer. Yeah, that's right. And when you're in the batter's box, you better get ready to take some hacks against big league arms like Mike Remlinger, Ray Burris, and Tim Stoddard. Northside Baseball Fantasy Camp is run by veterans of Randy Huntley's Fantasy Camp. Randy's a legend and will always be remembered for this gift he gave to baseball fans, to all of us. His legacy is in good hands. Northside Camp runs January 26th to February 2nd, 2025 in Tucson, Arizona. Roster spots are limited, so grab yours today. Go to wavelandevents.com. That's wavelandevents.com and click on Northside Baseball Fantasy Camp link for more information and to register. You can also follow Northside Baseball Fantasy Camp on Facebook. Sign up now. My special guest today is a comedy legend. He's been in show business for over 50 years. He made over 500 appearances on national TV and over 60 appearances on The Tonight Show. He's an American dream story. Humble beginnings on the south side of Chicago from a working class family. He was an insurance man at the age of 28 when he decided to take the leap. Soon after, he made his bones in comedy in Chicago. He then toured the nation for 13 years, opening for Frank Sinatra. Then on his own, he opened Vegas, Tahoe, Reno, Atlantic City for years. With legendary artists like Liza Minnelli, Smokey Robinson, Sammy Davis Jr. In 2020, his memoir was published, My Journey from the Streets and Saloons to the Stage and Sinatra. He's also a big Cubs fan, and was in my documentary, This Old Cub, talking about my father and his 69 Cubs team. I'm so excited to talk with him about his amazing life. Tom Dreesen, thank you for being on the show.
Jeff, my career wasn't as long as that introduction. Thank you very much.
Hey, man, nice. I tell you, God, 50 years and still going strong. I have to ask, first thing, growing up on the South Side, how did you become a Cubs fan?
I get that question all the time. I was like 5, 6 years old, and my dad would listen to Cub games on the radio, and so growing up, I'm hearing, I'm a little boy. I don't realize I was living in enemy territory at the time, and then my mom was a bartender, and my uncle, who owned the bar, he had Cub games on all the time. So I was indoctrinated. I listened to people way before your time: Andy Pavko, Bill Nicholson, Phil Cavaretta. And I'm a little boy hearing these names. By the time, and I didn't realize I was in White Sox territory, but by the time I was 8 years old, I could take a punch, because White Sox fans they always talk about Boston and New York and these great rivalries. There's no greater rivalry than Cubs and White Sox fans. I mean, there were neighborhoods on the South Side. If you went in there, if you were a Cub fan, you wouldn't come out alive. So, but anyhow,
right? That was. It's strange because it feels like being a Sox fan, they hated the Cubs fan, but Cubs fans could, we could talk to a Sox fan. Did it seem that way to you? It felt that way to me,
at one time when I was growing up, both teams were in last place. I mean, the Ernie Banks years where Ernie was MVP 2 years in a row on a team that was in last place. I mean, that kind of stuff. So, and the White Sox weren't doing good either. And I once wrote a joke that I did on the Tonight Show that it became like a sports joke of the year. I said, when I was growing up, I used to go to church and pray every year that the Cubs and the White Sox would merge so Chicago could only have one bad team.
Oh, that's hilarious. I got to, and I found out, I found this book on Blake Cullen, the traveling secretary, and I found out you were friends with him, Blake.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing guy because, I do a lot of research about that time because I'm doing a story about my dad's era. And he said, man, he had a great story in there about you and Frank Sinatra, that you were in this empty bar one night in a small town, and this lady walked in looking for the jukebox to play some music.
What it was, there was a guy down in Sidney Chaplin. He actually was Charlie Chaplin's son. And Sidney had been on Broadway and Bye Bye Birdie and stuff like that. But he retired and he bought a bar down in Rancho Mirage, right down on Frank Sinatra Drive, right down where Frank Sinatra lived. Oh. And Frank would stay up till dawn, and remind me later on, I'll tell you a great Harry Carey story with Frank and Harry Carey. But Frank would stay up till dawn. And he wanted you to hang with him, which was fun for about 10 years. But after a while, you want to get him to play golf once in a while, But so we'd go into Sidney Chaplin's bar one night, and Sidney would give Frank the keys. He'd say, lock up, because, he didn't want to stay there till dawn. And once in a while, a bartender would stay in, which was good because Frank tipped him real good. But this particular night, it was just Frank and I. And, Frank forgot to lock the front door. The bar closed. We're there. It's like 2:30 in the morning, and we're talking, and I look over Frank's shoulder. He's looking at me, talking to me. And a station wagon pulled up, and a woman was driving. And another woman got out. She was like 50, 55 years old. She got out, and she comes in the bar. Frank left the door open, and she walks up, and she said, excuse me, did they have a jukebox in here? And Frank Sinatra turned around and looked her right in the face. She said, I'm sorry, what did you say? She said, did they have a jukebox in here? And Frank looked around, and he said, no. And he said off the cuff, he said, I'll sing for you. She said, no, thanks. And she turned around and she walked out. And Frank watched her like a little boy watching her go out the door. I said, she obviously didn't recognize you. He said, maybe she did. Maybe she did.
That's awesome. Wow. Can you imagine that? And if she didn't, I mean, wow, she missed a moment, right?
Yeah.
Just visualizing you two in a bar like that is just something really special. I got it. What was your upbringing like? What were your parents and your siblings?
There were 8 of us kids. There were 4 boys and 4 girls, and we were very poor. We lived in I call it a shack. We didn't have any bathtub, no shower, no hot water. we boil water. This wasn't
Wow.
during the Depression. I'm not that old, but it was tough times for us. My dad liked to drink a lot, and he liked his beer. My mother used to always say, "Your father likes his beer." I said, "Mom, he likes his beer, your beer, and the neighbor's beer." I grew up shining shoes in taverns, setting pins in bowling alleys, caddying in the summertime. I had a newspaper route. All of this to feed my brothers and sisters, and none of this do I regret. I think it was, it builds character, and also you go through a lot of tough times, and I had to learn to survive, Uh, so, and then at 16, I dropped out of high school because I was embarrassed about going to school with holes in my shoes and stuff like that. I was setting pins in bowling alleys. I started running with a pretty tough crowd, getting in street fights and stuff. Nothing I'm proud of, and then at 17, I went in the Navy, and that changed my life. The day I turned 17, I spent 4 years in the military, and all of a sudden, when I went in the boot camp, everybody had a shaved head. They shaved everybody's head. Everybody had the same clothes. For the first time in my life, I felt equal to my peers, and from that point on, it was up to you to show what you had. And that 4 years in the Navy matured me a great deal. And, and anyhow,
Wow.
I came out of the Navy and wandered aimlessly, going from job to job. I worked on the loading docks. I was a teamster at one time. And then they dropped my card and I became management. I was the foreman of all these teamsters, which turned out to be a real lot of fun,
Right.
At one time you're their buddy, you're working with them, and now you're their boss, so that didn't always work out real good. But I went from job to job. Excuse me. I would tend bar in the winter times. I'd work construction. And I went from job to job, wandering aimlessly, never really knowing what it was I wanted to do. Married, had a wife and 3 kids, and I started selling life insurance, as you pointed out earlier. And I was very successful because I was in a civic group called the JCs, the Junior Chamber of Commerce. And they taught you leadership, how to, if there were any problems in the community, they tackled those problems, and then in the meantime, taught you how to form a committee, how to have subcommittees, and how to get the job done. And while I was in it for a while, I wrote a drug education program teaching grade school children the ills of drug abuse with humor. It was a concept I had because we were tackling the problems of the community, and that was one of the problems as it is even today. But I thought, let's get to them before they get into high school. So I wrote this whole program teaching children the ills of drug abuse, but first getting them laughing, playing music, having a lot of fun with them. And anyhow, joining me on it was a young black man who graduated from Norfolk State College. E.I. DuPont recruited him out of college into Chicago, and he joined the Harvey JCs, which I was in. And he wanted to help me with the project. We went into schools. The program became very, very successful, and we got the kids laughing all the time. Tim Reed, who, as you know, later became Venus Flytrap on WKRP Cincinnati and on a show called Sister Sister. One day, a little 8th grade girl walking out of the classroom said, "You guys are funny. You ought to become a comedy team."
Wow.
The thought of a comedy team intrigued me, and Tim too. No one had ever done a black and white comedy team before. So we became America's first black and white comedy team, and history shows we were the last. There's never been one since. But we stayed together 6 years, and then, as you pointed out, we went separate ways, and then all those other things happened for me. That's a long story to a very short question. Sorry.
No, that sums it up, man. Wow, that's something special. And did you know that? Like, obviously, this girl said you guys be funny, but to make that leap, how did you do it? Like, what was inside of you? The one thing that had you do that leap from your working job into comedy?
Well, at first it was, and by the way, my first year in the insurance business, I was a member of the $1 Million Round Table. A year and a half after I was in the business, year and a half, I quit and went in the show business. And the president of the company, flew in from Columbus and said, "I've never done this to any agent before. Are you out of your mind to go into such a precarious business when you got such a great foundation?" But what happened was Tim and I fooled around with the idea, writing what we thought was material. And this went on for like 4 months before we ever got on a stage. And one night, there weren't any comedy clubs in America in those days. So we got on the stage one night. in a nightclub, a jazz club on the south side of Chicago. And we went on stage, and something I had written got a laugh. And it was, Jeff, it was like an epiphany. It was one of those, like, whoa, this is what I want to do. It was like one of the B movies where the dark clouds open up and the sun bursts through.
Right.
I said, yeah. Oh, yeah, this is what I want to do. Because honestly, Jeff, I had been praying before that, saying, I'd be in a bar at 2:00 in the morning with my buddies looking around. I'd say, I don't belong here, but I didn't know where I belong. And I'd pray. I said, God, what is it I'm supposed to be doing? This can't be it. And when I got that first laugh with something I had written, I went, whoa, I want to do this. The thought that you might make a living making people laugh overwhelmed me. It was a Friday night, Jeff. I couldn't sleep that whole night. I was married, I had a wife and 3 kids. I got up in the morning, on Saturday morning, I went down to the church where I had been an altar boy, when I was a boy, and where I sang in the choir, where my mother sang in the choir when she was a little girl. And there was no one in the church. I prayed. I said, God, now I know what I want. I want to be a comedian. Oh, God, I'm praying. If you let me make my living as a comedian, I promise I'll do charity works. I'll do this. I was making all these promises, and it took a while, but I've been doing it 55 years now. And I thank God every night, because it's the joy of joys, finding the work you love. What more can you ask for? That you go to work every day loving what you do. It's just.
No doubt. Now it's quite a story. I mean, especially back in that time, to shift like that, and then to have the confidence. And you did prepare, though. You guys got together and you kind of wrote scripts, and your show was called the Tim and Tom Show, right? And you guys played in different bars and stuff. I mean, throughout.
We played what they call, in those days, again, I repeat, there weren't any comedy clubs. So we work what they call the Chitlin Circuit. It's an affectionate term given to black-owned, black-operated nightclubs. The 20 Grand in Detroit, the High Chaparral in Chicago, the Burning Spear in Chicago, Guys and Gals Lounge, the Cotton Club, the Sugar Shack in Boston, the Club Harlem in Atlantic City. And we worked around the country, all black clubs. And we also later went on to do the Playboy circuit, so we worked all white clubs too. So,
what was that like as an interracial team out there? Did you get flack, or was it everyone open to it?
Well, there were a lot of people that were really open to it, but there was always that small percentage that were not. The interesting thing about racism in those days, first of all, on the 4th time we ever appeared on stage, a guy put a lit cigarette out in Tim's face and damn near beat the hell out of me. I boxed when I was in the service, but he outweighed me by 100 pounds. And we later found out that he was with the taxi squad with the Bears and had played with the Philadelphia Eagles, I think, one year. He was a big, brutal guy. And anyhow, so it turned into a real Donnybrook, a real brawl, and I thought I was going to die in it. but anyhow, we get in the car afterward, and Tim and we'd only been on stage 4 times. And we got in the car, and Tim looked at me. He said, "Welcome to show business." But the interesting thing about racism in those days, let's go back to it. 1969 is when we started out. At the time, America was in turmoil. There were race riots all over the country, and including in Harvey, Illinois, where I grew up at, one of the largest riots in the country, in the neighborhood I grew up in. But all over the country, African Americans were rioting in major cities, feeling disenfranchised from the system. Also, the Vietnam War was raging, and the students were protesting all over. So America was in turmoil. And we were going across the land. Wherever there was racial tension, we would perform. We did 11 prisons in 1 year. We did the county jail in Chicago 3 times, We did high schools, colleges. We weren't preaching. We were just trying to make people laugh, And the interesting thing about racism in those days was if there was a black guy who hated white people, hated with a passion, he wasn't mad at me. He was mad at Tim for being with me. Mm-hmm. If there was a white guy, a redneck who hated black people with a passion, he wasn't mad at Tim. He was mad at me for being with Tim. And so you had to deal with that. But it wasn't a lot, but it did happen on occasion. And we always had to be prepared for that.
How often were you guys performing? Were you like doing it on weekends? I mean, were you still keeping your job?
Oh, yeah. In the beginning, we were, because, obviously there was no money. No one paid in those days. And so Tim was, as I said, a marketing rep for EI DuPont. And, but I finally quit my job and dedicated myself to this, much to the dismay of my family and everything. But I knew that you had to, if you were going to go on this incredible endeavor, you had to really focus and make it, to me, the main point of your life of working, that you had to dedicate yourself to that commitment that I wanted us to become the greatest comedy team in America. I thought we could, that one day that could happen. And so I dedicated myself to it. And it wasn't easy. My wife left me 3 times. She hated show business. She didn't marry, and I don't blame her. She didn't marry a comedian. She married a working class guy out of the service. Her dad worked in a factory 42 years, never missed a payday, brought a check home every Friday, never missed a day of work. She grew up in that kind of environment. And here's this guy going, and we got a wife and 3 kids, and you're going into not only going into show business, but you're going to show business as the first black and white comedy team, and the resistance you're going to receive for that. And so it was really, it was a lot of praying. I'll be honest with you. It was really some tough times,
What do you think you had inside you, looking back now on those times, and saying, and your wife, understandably, it makes total sense. You're doing something completely extreme at the time, for your way of life. What was it in you that kept persevering, that kept you going through it?
I just knew once I got that first laugh, I knew that I could do this. I knew I could write material to make people laugh, and I knew I could deliver it. And I wanted to do that. I can't describe how many hard times I went through all during that time. I ended up, my wife left me on 3 different occasions, took the kids. I ended up sleeping in my brother's attic for a while.
Mm.
He didn't have any extra room there, but he had like an attic with a couch across the street from the YMCA. It was like one of the old movies again, where the neon light was flashing into my room every night. I one time, it's ironic. One night I was listening to the radio and Sammy Davis Jr. was singing "I Gotta Be Me," that song. I'll go it alone if that's how it must be. I can't be right for somebody else if I'm not right for me. And I thought about that. I said, I couldn't be the best husband, the best father, the best son, the best anything if I didn't be what I wanted to be on this short time that we all have on this planet. And those lyrics stuck in my brain. Ironically, years later, I toured with Sammy for 3 years as his opening act, But it was things like that you just know that this is what you came on this planet to do. Either, you think about a guy that's a great baseball player like your dad, that they knew that's what they were supposed to do. And I knew that I was supposed to make people laugh. I'm not going to do it for you, but years ago, I wrote a poem called The Sound of Laughter. And the opening line is, as far back as I can remember, or shortly thereafter, I love to hear the sound of laughter.
Mm.
And so when I was a little boy shining shoes, my uncle was behind the bar. He would tell jokes behind the bar. And I would listen to those jokes. And I was so fascinated that with his vocabulary and his timing, his inflection, he could cause this sound to come out of everybody's body in that room and fill that room like electricity and unite everybody. Everybody was now together. I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. I told a lot of his jokes, many that should not be told on a Catholic school playground when I was a little boy. But
So you were a funny kid right away then, like because of that environment that you grew up in.
I could always tell a story. I could also see, I always saw the humor in things. Even when I was an altar boy, if I was at a funeral, my mind would be thinking, what if they picked that coffin up and the lid opened up and the guy fell out? I was always thinking crazy, funny crap, and something would happen. And I'd say, it was kind of funny, but I'd say, how that could have been funnier if this would have happened. My mind worked like that,
Now, were you the oldest of your siblings?
No, I was third. My older brother, Glenn, my sister, Darlene, God rest her soul, she passed away with MS complications. And then me, and then there were 5 under me,
5 under you? And so Did anyone else get into comedy later in their life at all? Or
No.
you?
I have one brother that can sing real good, but he lives in North Carolina. He sings in a church. And I think he's the like a music leader there or something like that. But no.
It was just you. Wow. And when was the time that you met? How did you meet Sinatra? I know you and Tim went your separate ways, like you said. When you went your separate way, how did you get that Sinatra connection?
It took a long time. I ended up on the West Coast here. Again, my wife and I got separated again, but I finally got her back. But I got on the West Coast here, and I struggled at the in those days, wherever you went in America, 1975, people say, "What do you do for a living?" You say, "I'm a stand-up comedian." They say, "Oh yeah." have you ever been on Johnny Carson? If you hadn't been on Johnny Carson in the eyes of America, you just weren't a comedian. You might want to be one, you might going to be one. But that was the show that launched. Freddie Prinze did one appearance, got a sitcom the next day. So you had to get on at the Comedy Store in order for them to come and see you. That was the only game in town in LA in those days. Again, there weren't any comedy clubs. That just started out. And there weren't comedy clubs who paid. You went on for free. So I worked my way to the Comedy Store. It's a long story, but I ended up sleeping in an old Nash Rambler. It wasn't my car. It was up on blocks. The front seat came down. I was on my ass. I was really, really down. But I hitchhiked every night to the Comedy Store and finally got on audition, and I got the audition. And then I became a regular. Then I was able to get a couple of little small gigs there and go back I went to Canada to do a TV show, went back to Chicago, worked at Mr. Kelly's opening for Fats Domino, made enough money in those 2 weeks to bring my wife and kids out here. I talked her into coming out here, After I'm on the Comedy Store for a long time, I kept pestering the Tonight Show to come and see me. And a guy named Craig Tennis came to see me and put me on a show. I auditioned that night with 3 acts, a comedy team called Baum and Eston, a new kid named Billy Crystal, and me. And I don't know what happened to Billy Crystal, but I'm on the Jeff Santos show right now. Eat your heart out, Billy.
What a story, man.
So that led me to the Tonight Show, and I got my first appearance on the Tonight Show. I got bumped 4 times. Every time I'd go there, they'd run out of time. And finally, the 4th time I'm there, I'm in makeup. And Fred DeCordova, the producer, came in makeup, and he said, I got bad news for you. I said, what? He said, you're going on tonight. Now, 28 million people watched that show in those days. You're behind that curtain, and you're about to walk out in front of not only this audience, but 28 million people, and Johnny Carson's over to your right with Ed McMahon. And all the agents, the managers, the casting people, they watched that show in those days. So the pressure was enormous. And not only that, my mother had everybody in Harvey, Illinois watching the show. So if I bombed, I couldn't even go back home, So now, all of a sudden, Johnny, they go into commercial break. You're waiting behind that curtain, and you're talking to God. Then, what was my first line? I can't remember my first joke. Oh yeah, you're going. Oh please God, stay with me on this one. This is a tough one. And Johnny, they come back out of commercial. The curtain lights up because they're out of commercial. And Johnny says, "We're back now. And I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight because my next guest is making his first appearance on The Tonight Show." That one line, I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight. He's setting them up for you. And you walk out, he's introduced Tom Dreesen, you walk out and you hit your mark on the floor. You can't see the audience. The lights are so bright. You just see an on camera in front of you. And you get that first joke out and it gets a laugh. And I got that second joke out, I got a laugh. Now the third joke, I hear Johnny and Ed McMahon laughing. Now I'm on a roll. I end up getting 8 applause, and now it was time for me to go. I said to the audience, you've been a great audience. This is my first appearance on The Tonight Show. And show business is a tough life. So if you like me, just if you like me, and you're Protestant, say a prayer. If you're Catholic, light a candle. If you're Jewish, somebody in your family owns a nightclub. Tell them about me, will you please? And I walked back through the curtain, and they call me back out to take a second bow. I come back out for that second bow. Johnny's going like this. And I never stopped working since that night. Sammy Davis took me on the road. I'm going with Smokey Robinson, Natalie Cole, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Frankie Avalon and me, James Darren, Mac Davis. I'm working with all these artists. And then while I'm touring with Smokey Robinson, I'm in Tahoe at Caesars, and Frank Sinatra's working at Harrah's. And I had worked at Harrah's before, so I was going to be there for a week, and why I chose that one night, I don't know. Now I think it's divine intervention, but I could have went any night. But this particular night, I said, well, I'm going to go watch Frank tonight. I called the maitre d' over there. He said, yeah, Tommy, don't worry about it. We'll take care of you. I finished my show with Smokey, and I went out the side door at Caesars and rushed over. There's one casino before Harrah's, and I'm running into the showroom because I didn't want to miss Frank's opening. I had seen Frank in Chicago at the stadium. When Frank Sinatra walked on the stage, the electricity. The crowd, they'd go wild, and I didn't want to miss that opening. So I'm rushing into the showroom, and the vice president of Harrah's Hotel, a man named Holmes Hendrickson, saw me, and he was talking to a big heavyset guy with a cigar. And he said, Tommy, come here. And I reluctantly went over there. And he said, Tommy, this is Mickey Rudin. Well, I recognized the name. That was Frank Sinatra's lawyer. A very powerful guy in our business. He said, Mickey, this is Tom Dreesen, and I think Tom would make a great opening act for Frank Sinatra. And the lawyer got a pained expression on his face like he heard that a million times. And he winked at the vice president, but I caught the wink. He said, "Hey, kid, if I gave you a week with Frank, would you want more than 50,000? I said, "Mr. Rudin, put it this way. If you gave me a week with Frank, would you want more than 50,000? He said, "Oh, I like this kid." And he gave me 1 week with Frank in Atlantic City. And I thought, this is great. I'll get my picture taken with it, hang it at every bar in Chicago, at Gibson Steakhouse and all that. And that would be it. But the second night I was with him, he and his wife, Barbara, took me out to dinner. And I can remember like it was yesterday. He set his knife and his fork down. He said, "I like your material and I like your style. I'd like you to do a few other dates with me if you're interested." And I didn't say, "Let me check my calendar." I said, "Yeah." It turned into 14 years, 45, 50 cities a year, a great relationship, a great friendship. I was a pallbearer at his funeral and I spoke at his funeral, and I miss him every day of my life,
Oh my God, that's an amazing story. Holy cow. That's a movie. Man, I mean, just the journey from growing up to there to those moments, the big moments that you just talked about. Holy cow, man.
Well, I do a one-man show now called The Man Who Made Sinatra Laugh. And it's basically, it's a little boy shining shoes in the south side of Chicago, Harvey, Illinois, and Frank Sinatra's on the jukebox. And one day that little boy is carrying Frank Sinatra's coffin out of a church in Beverly Hills, California. And I take him on that journey. That again, as you point out, my book is called Still Standing, but the subtitle is My Journey from Streets and Saloons to the Stage and Sinatra. In that time, Jeff, I turned down more sitcoms than most comedians get offered in a lifetime. People would chide me, "Why are you still touring with Frank? When I could have done a sitcom, had all that kind of stuff." But it was like, to me, I knew it was the end of an era for this incredible entertainer. This arguably the greatest career show business has ever known. I mean, forget about the fact that he's the greatest pop singer of all time, but also he's Academy Awards, Emmys, Grammys. He was a brilliant actor. He was, and he was a wonderful guy to me. And in a lot of ways, when I first was touring with him, he was the boss. I was the opening act for his audience. So he was the boss. Later, he became a buddy. We hung out all night long. As I pointed out earlier, he was nocturnal. He never went to bed till the sun came up, never. And then later in his life, he was like a father to me. And
Wow.
so he gave me a lot of advice in my life and stuff. He was terrific to me. And I knew it was the end of an era.
Yeah.
Christopher Morley, the author, once said, "Success is living the life you want." You want. Here I am. I'm touring with Frank Sinatra all over the country in 45, 50 cities a year in front of 20,000 seat arenas. The challenge of that every night to get that audience up for this guy, this star. The challenge, and I digress, but I'll tell you, this is the way it went. If I said to you, "Jeff, you have to do this," I say, "Jeff, it's 5 minutes now before you're going on. This is what happened to me every night. Jeff, there's 20,000 people out there, and they're in the round. They're not in front of you, proscenium. They're behind you. They're in your left, your right. There's 20,000 people out there, Jeff. I want you to go out there, and for the next 45 minutes, Jeff, I want you to hold their attention. Oh, one more thing, Jeff. I want you to hold their attention, but I want you to make them laugh for 45 minutes. Oh, one more thing, Jeff. I want you to make them laugh when you want them to laugh. I want you to pull the strings on the emotions of 20,000 people. No props, no tricks, no charts, no special arrangement, no special orchestra, nothing, just you and 20,000 people. And one more thing, Jeff, not one of them came to see you."
That is amazing. That's right.
That's your job every night. And that was exciting. And I had to do that every night. And in the meantime, I'm also playing golf on a tour called the Celebrity Players Tour. It was basketball, baseball, football, hockey, tennis, and show business people that were 10 handicap or below. And it was Johnny Bench, Mike Schmidt, Mario Lemieux, John Elway, Dan Marino, Michael Jordan. We had 45 Hall of Famers. And show business, it was me, Matt Lauer, Brian Gumbel, Jack Wagner, Eddie Murray, Smokey Robinson, Frankie Avalon. And I was the only comedian on the tour, so I was the number one. And they paid us, by the way. If you told me when I was a little boy that one day you're going to get into an arena with the greatest athletes who ever lived in your lifetime, and you're going to compete with them, I'd say that is impossible. But here I was in an arena competing with all these great athletes who I admired, from afar, and now became my friends. And then also, if you'd have told me when I was shining shoes, you heard a guy in the jukebox, come fly with me, let's fly away. One day you're going to fly away with him. I said, none of this
Oh,
can happen.
no, that's a, yeah, that's.
So that's why I say success is living the life you want.
Yeah. Now, that one-man show, where are you doing that?
I do it in theaters all around the country.
You're doing it now?
I did it in Chicago like 7 times. I just recently did it at a place called the Den Theater in Chicago. But I've done it, what I like, I don't work comedy clubs except to break in new material when I'm out here in LA. When you go into a theater, they've usually had their drink out in the lobby, and then they come and they sit down, and they're there to see that show. And that's when you have it is like waiters and waitresses coming through the room, interrupting your material and all that stuff. You got them in the palm of your hand. And it's a 90-minute show, so I can take my time.
Yeah, right.
Rush through it, anything, it's a joy of joys. And I do stand-up comedy. I open up with stand-up comedy, and it opens up with a video that Dennis Farina, God rest his soul, narrated for me, and it's about my life. And then I come out and I do stand-up comedy, and I eventually segue over to a bar, and there's a bottle of Jack Daniels on the bar, which was Frank's drink of choice. And Frank is singing, and I tell him the first time I heard that voice, I was shining shoes in Harvey, Illinois, and he was on the jukebox, and I take the audience from that little boy.
Oh, that's great.
Point it out,
Wow.
And I end with it. I have him laughing, and then I take him to the funeral. I actually have him in tears sometimes, and then I close with a funny monologue, and then toast them all and say goodnight.
Oh, I love it. I love one-man shows, and that just, God, I'd love to see that. That's amazing. And when you opened for Frank for all those years, you obviously had a set thing that you went. Did you change it up much, or did you?
No, one of the reasons he kept me, because when I did 61, as you pointed out, 61 appearances on the Tonight Show, you had to keep coming up with a new 5 minutes every time you did the Tonight Show. And Johnny didn't want 2 guys going to bar jokes. He wanted original monologues. So I was in the habit of writing new material. And Frank, we would go back to the same cities, and Frank liked the idea that I could keep coming up with different material. One of the tricks that I learned, I teach young comedians now, you walk out in front of 20,000 people in an arena, 3,000 or 4,000 are still trying to find their seats. You know what I'm saying? There's always that late arrival. So you've got to bring them. They came to see Frank Sinatra. Now, my name might be on the marquee in Caesar's Palace or some of the places I was under contract at 7 different hotels with Frank in Vegas. Your name might be on the marquee, but they came to see Frank. And now in a 20,000 seat arena, sometimes it just said Sinatra out there. So you were actually an intrusion. Now, how am I going to get them focused on me? So I didn't go out there and start doing a material from the beginning. I'd go out there. I want to get them to focus their point up here. I'd say, how many of you out there, because the orchestra was in the pit, and when they go bum ba da dum bum, they say, ladies and gentlemen, and the lights flashing. They thought Frank was coming out, and they'd introduce me. I'd come out and say, how many of you out there thought Frank was coming out? Frank Sinatra was coming out. Applaud. And they'd applaud. I'd say, I know just how you feel. I'm a little bit disappointed myself, Now, what I did was, I'd say, now, how many of you out there are in this arena your very first time? Applaud. Notice I didn't say raise your hand. I'd say applaud. They'd applaud. I'd say, how many of you out there are seeing Frank Sinatra live your very first time? Applaud. And they'd applaud. Then I'd say, how many of you out there aren't wearing any underwear or something like that? And applaud. My point is, I talk, you react. I talk. I'm doing this behind me, in front of me. I'm bringing the focus here. Then I would have a couple jokes about the town we were in, Louisville, Kentucky, Omaha, Nebraska, wherever we were appearing in. I'd write a couple jokes that afternoon about the town, where I mentioned the mayor, the governor of the state, or something like that. I'd do a couple local jokes that they'd realize that I'd done my research, my homework, and then I'd go into my aim material once I had them all focused on me,
Oh, wow. And so after you did your opening, now do you sit and listen to Frank every night? What was your gig after that?
Oh yeah, I mean, you kidding me? When I toured with Sammy Davis, I'd sit in the wings night after night. It was like show business 101.
Oh,
These
wow.
guys were Frank and Sam and Dean. They took command of that stage when they went on that stage. I watched their every move. Yeah, to sit in the wings and watch Frank night after night.
Oh my God.
It was amazing.
Yeah. Wow. I tell you, that's something, man. Unbelievable. Now we'll talk about the Cubs. You were in this old Cub. Thank you for being in the movie, man. It just meant a ton. What was that season like for you? Because you're actually fresh now as a comedian in '69, right? So did you pay attention a lot to that?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, are you kidding me? Ever since I was a little boy, I mean, I lived and died with him. It's in those days when you were growing up in those days, you were at work all day long. The first thing you did when you came home or when you got off work and went in the bar, what'd the Cubs do today? That was the first question you had. We didn't have cell phones and all that stuff. How'd the Cubs do today? And we lived and died with them. That, you know, you, always that term, wait till next year.
Yeah.
The Cub fans used to say, we'd go to spring training and the first pitch, the umpire would say, ball one. We'd look at each other and say, wait till next year. And I believe it's because we could identify, the Cubs did their best. They went out there and they did their best and they come up short. They would come up short. And that's what we do in life a lot. We work hard. We try the best we can, but we come up short. You get up in the morning, you got to go to work construction. It's snow on the ground and you're struggling to get the car won't start. You got gas line freeze. You get jumped. You get to work. You bust your hump all day long. You come home and there still isn't enough money to make things go around. But so you survive, and that's what the Cubs were to us. And also, I mean, think about Wrigley Field. I've written the foreword to a lot of books, but you think about Wrigley Field. You're driving to a neighborhood, and you come to a stop sign, and there's a ballpark. And you're going to go in that ballpark and you're going to sit down in a seat that your great-great-great-grandfather sat in, that your great-grandfather sat in, that your grandfather sat in, that your father sat in, that you sit in, and your sons are going to sit in, and you're going to sit in that seat. And all of a sudden, you're going to watch a game that they all watched. And all of a sudden, time stands still. Everybody, at some point in your life, we always say, gee, I wish time would stand still. Life is going too fast. But at Wrigley Field, life stands still for that game, to watch a game that all your people behind you watch and the people in front of you. It's a shrine,
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time there with your dad up in the booth, every time I'd come to town.
Right.
Go up in the booth with your dad, and I loved him. I always made him laugh. One time, I don't know if you ever heard this story.
No.
I went in the booth, and his co-host, God, what was his co-host name again?
What, Pat Hughes?
Oh yeah, Pat. I'm sorry, Pat. But before Pat, there was another guy.
Oh, it was Tom Brenneman and Bob Brenly, I think.
Yeah, but anyhow, nonetheless, I'd say to them, a little boy came home the other day, and he said to his mother, "I just got a part in a play, Mom." And they said, and Mom said, "Oh, what part are you playing?" She said, "I'm playing Vicky Santos' husband." And the mother said, "You go back and tell them you want a speaking part." And your dad used to crack up over that joke.
Oh man, I got to. And Blake Colin, because I read his book, and he's an interesting man. How did you become friends with him? Sounds like you had a decent friendship with him.
Everybody on that, Ned Coletti and what happened was Jim Fry. Years ago, Jim Fry said to me, we're having lunch and a brunch actually in Chicago. He said, "How did you become a Cub fan?" And I told him the whole story as a little boy. And then my brother and I would shine shoes in all the bars. And my mom would put she'd keep the money, but she put a nickel up in the cup. And when that cup got full, it was an old cracked cup up in the cupboard. We'd take the IC downtown, take the elevator over to Wrigley, and we'd sit in the bleachers. And I said, and I was telling Jim this, I said, in bleachers. And I said, I would see the bad boy there. And I told my brother one time, "Boy, wouldn't it be great if we could be a bad boy? We could be down on the field." My brother said, "No, they don't. Only the rich kids on the north side, Tommy. They don't let us poor kids on the south side do that." And Jim Fry said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Well, maybe we can make your dream come true." And he lets me become a celebrity bad boy for 4 years at Wrigley. I would come in once a year and do 4 games there.
Oh, wow.
4 or 5 games. And then they let me hit batting practice. Let me hit BP. I'd go out in the outfield. Bobby De Niro let me use his glove.
Oh, Bobby D. Yeah.
And then, I just had so much fun being bad boy. And then, the years with Harry Carey and One time the Chicago Tribune's doing a story on me, and so the photographer came out while I'm hitting batting practice. John Cox, the GM, was going to pitch to me. He pitched BP in those days, John Cox. And Rick Sutcliffe said, Tom, what are you doing? I said, well, the Chicago Tribune is doing a story. He said, let me pitch to you. I said, oh, Rick, I'm gonna hit a couple, I played in a fast pitch softball league till I was 57 years old. That doesn't make me a major leaguer, but so Rick said, I'll throw some in there. So Rick is just lobbing them in there. And I'm hitting a ground ball here, a pop up there, a ground ball. And then Rick's lobbing them in there. And then I got a hold of one, hit it out in the outfield. And it took like 3 hops to the warning track. And the Chicago Tribune said I bounced one off which I did not. But now when I did that, I opened my big mouth. I said, hey, Rick, boy, if I could face you, I'd be in the Hall of Fame. And I never saw another pitch. He threw sliders. He threw curveballs. He threw fastball. I couldn't hit. I was swinging up here and swinging. I opened my big mouth,
Oh, man. Did you know
story, right? So Harry Carey.
Yeah, tell me the Harry Carey story. Go ahead.
Well,
yeah.
Frank and I are at the Ambassador East, and we're watching a Cub game. And Harry comes on singing. And Frank says, I got to teach Harry how to sing that song, because, Harry couldn't sing. So I've talked to Harry about it and everything. And I decided these 2 guys, they both stayed out till late. I'm going to see who can outdrink who. So we got in a pump room, and Frank and Harry are, going toe to toe. We're drinking and talking. About 4:00 in the morning, Harry Carey said, you got me, Frank. I've had it. Frank sent him to bed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Just seeing those 2 guys together. Did you know Leo well? Because Frank knew Leo, right?
No, I didn't. I never met. No, Frank and Leo were real close. Leo DeRocher, yeah. No, I mean, I was a fan of Leo. What made me a fan of Leo? Not so much the Cubs. When Jackie Robinson, came up, and there were guys on the team signing a petition that they wouldn't play with him, and Leo called him in and read him the riot act. Told him he's here to stay because he can play this game, and I always admired him for that.
Yeah. And Frank, because there's a photo out there of Frank and my dad and Beckert and Pepitone and 2 of Frank's guys. So my dad got to meet Frank, being a fellow Italian. I guess because of Leo, right? Because Leo was close to him. Yeah. But you came a little after the '69 when you got to meet Frank, got together with Frank. So, wow, man, unbelievable stories. Just an amazing life. I'm lost for words that you coming on my show. It just means so much. And Brig Avery, thank you, Brig, for getting in touch with you. And just amazing to hearing your story. It's wonderful. What do you got going on right now that you're doing?
I'm still doing my one-man show. In fact, I just booked a gig this morning. My agent got a hold of me of a place in Michigan that wants me in May called Andiamos. It's a great. It's a supper club that, like the old days, and I'll do my one-man show there. I've always wanted to work there. I hear it's a great place. But then I'll do that, and then I'm working on new material all the time. They're doing a documentary on my life right now. We've done some filming of it.
Oh, great!
It's based from my book, Still Standing.
Okay.
Which, by the way, in the book there's a chapter on the Cubs in there too.
There is. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. Everyone get that book. You're an anomaly, Tom. Such a legend, and I'm so fortunate to be talking to you. And thanks again for being on. Really.
Well, let me tell you, Brigham Avery did not just get in touch with me. He stayed in touch with me 3-4 times a week. Hey, Jeff wants you on the show. Hey.
Oh, that's so cool.
Brig, he brought it to me, and he kept me. I kept saying, "Yeah, I'm going to do it. I promise I'm going to do it." But he never let up on me. He made sure that I did do it. In fact, right now he's probably going to text me in a few minutes and say,
"Yeah, Brig, I met over at Gino's, and boy, he's out there doing his thing too, man. And I really respect that. And it says a lot about someone, and just how you went at it, man. It's inspirational. Be yourself, and I really believe too, Tom. Hard on these words that. How you grew up and went and joined the Navy. I mean, I think kids should do that after high school today. It's almost like we need something like that to really get yourself grounded and getting ready for life. Because
if you're not going to go to college, and Harvey, where I grew up at, if you went into the pizza place after I came out of the service, if you went into the pizza parlor I hung around in, and there were 20 guys in there, 19 of them served. We were that little town, Harvey, on the south side. There was all military kids went World War I, World War II,
Yep.
Korea, Vietnam. I mean, if you didn't go into college, then you went in the service,
This Santo moment is brought to you by Onesti Entertainment. In the off-season of 1970, the legendary Mill Run Theater in Niles, Illinois, featured famous comedian Milton Berle with the Chicago Cubs. The Cubs, appearing before a packed house night after night in their uniforms, were Ernie Banks, Joe Pepitone, Billy Williams, and Ron Santo. That Santoid was brought to you by Onesti Entertainment.
Crackerjack.
Hello.
This call is being recorded.
Karl Marquardt, Jeff Santo. You're my crackerjack.
Hey, Jeff. How about that? What's up, man?
Hey, Matt. Catch you all right time?
Yeah, cool. Sure.
Okay. Well, listen, man. I've been getting a lot of texts from friends wanting to know about the Cubs fantasy camp that's happening in January. So I'm calling one of the men in charge, yourself. So tell me about it. What's going on?
All right. Well, look, obviously, I've been to like 20 of these. And as you know,
Right.
It's just a phenomenal experience. And really, Randy gave everybody kind of the gift of a lifetime with this opportunity to go and basically, live this fantasy life and hang out and make amazing new friends and just an amazing experience. So what we've did, now that Randy's kind of moved on,
Right.
life is what it is. Yeah. So we're putting the family back together is what it comes down to, Jeff. We're putting, and then we're adding a lot of new people, obviously, not only new coaches, but a lot of new campers. So
Great.
We're getting together in Tucson, January 26th to February 2nd.
Okay.
And we're going to be playing just kind of like we did at Randy's camp forever, playing a 10-game season, break everybody up into teams. They'll all be coached by 2 or 3 former major leaguers. We've got a great roster of 19 former Cubs. Amazing guys, amazing names, a lot from Randy's camp. And then we've added a bunch of newer guys like Ron Say and Sean Dunston and Michael Barrett, Miguel Montero, Mickey Morandini's another new coach. So, it's basically, the magic of camp to anybody who hasn't been, if I can best describe this, the day you walk into that locker room the very first time and you see a locker with your name on it and it's got your uniforms with your name on it and you go up there and then you realize that right across from you is a locker, like say it's Fergie Jenkins' locker. And then you turn around and there's Bull Durham's locker. And it's like, this is like crazy. And then, suddenly you're on a team and like you're being coached, I don't know, by Willie Wilson and Bob Dernier or Jody Davis or, these guys are your coaches now. And then what do you know, after a day or two, they're not your coaches, they're your friends. And then you're going to dinner together. And then you're playing ball the next day. And then you're hanging out at the hotel bar. And then you're playing ball together. And then, in the off season, you get together. And then these become like a part of your fabric of your life. And it's all around this bond, this shared bond of loving this baseball team, And that affinity is tighter than any other thing that you may or may not have in common. Having that in common is a bond. It's magical, actually. You got people from all different walks of life, from all different geographic areas, different ages, and it's kind of weird. When I went to the first one of these, I was in my 30s. My wife bought it for me for a birthday present. I go to this thinking this is a once in a lifetime thing. This is amazing.
Did you go on your own? I mean, so
I did.
You were
I did.
in your 30s, okay,
yeah.
and so you
didn't
just
know any.
Really
didn't know any.
Didn't have any ties to any of the guys there. Now, when you went, like, how did she find it? Did you know of the camp? Did anyone tell you about it?
Here's what happened. We were hanging out with a buddy of mine. In fact, he's now coming to Cubs camp, but he's coming as a legend. He needs some new knees, so he can't play anymore. But he's coming to camp. But we were having he was a college friend of mine, and we were out with them one day, and his wife said, "Hey, I bought Jim this amazing present. He's a Phillies fan. He's from Philly. He's going to this Phillies fantasy camp." At that point, I had never heard of a baseball fantasy camp. And we're like, "Oh, this is amazing." He told me all about what he was going to get to do. This is before he went. And I thought, well, that's just great for Jim. And then my wife actually is the one that figured out that there's one that the Cubs run. And she has a funny story about it because she made an inquiry, and I guess she called, and the phone answered, and she goes, "Hey, I'm calling. I want to talk to somebody about maybe sending my husband to Randy Hundley's camp." And the voice on the other side goes, "This is Randy."
Right.
He picked up the phone, man. She called his house. Yeah. So
that's how it was, right? That's how those guys like Randy and my dad are. It's like, yeah, you're calling them. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. So she's just calling the number she found on a website, and Randy picks up. And the next thing you know, I get that as a present. And I was, first off, I couldn't believe I had 3 little kids. I'm going to go away for a week by myself. It felt really selfish, in a way, to be honest with you. But then I go and what an experience. But even there, the whole time I thought, this is one time. And then I'm driving to the airport. I had really bonded with a couple of guys, a guy named Kevin Mallahan, who is now long past. But he was my best camp buddy because we played together the first year, and then we played together every year until he unfortunately died. And then another guy that I became buddies with, a guy who hasn't come to camp now forever, but you may remember a guy, Dale Bernstein. He was a lawyer from Florida. Mm-hmm. So Dale, Kevin, and I had become like, we would drive back and forth from the ballpark, and then we were driving to the airport together. And Dale just goes to both of us, "Hey, I'll see you next year." And we're both like, "Yeah, no way. Yeah, thanks a lot. It's great meeting you, Dale." And he's like, "Hey, I've been coming to this for a long time, and I know a veteran when I meet one. You guys are veterans. I'll see you next year." And that stuck with us. And then we, Kevin and I talked over it, and we'll call it the off season, right? The off camp season. And wouldn't you know, the two of us just started going every year. And it gets in you, and you can't wait to go back.
Yeah, man. But, I see it. I've been there, right? And you guys there's a lot of you guys, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just so cool to see because and the environment is so relaxed, and just everyone is open to just hey, who's who, right? And the players too, the same way, man. Now the first one that you went to, was my dad there at that one?
He wasn't coaching, but he came by. He came by to the first several I was at. In fact, one of my prized, we post it every now and then, but I got a picture at a bank, one of the Saturday banquets when my kids came to camp with me. So they're little kids, man, but they're with your dad, and he signed a picture for them. It was really cool.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah, he used to come by, and he'd be there for a couple of days and hang out with everybody and attend morning meeting and stuff. But he was no longer. I first went in 2003. Okay. And he was no longer.
Right. Yeah. Well, that was that year. Yeah, that year in 2003, I was filming This Old Cubs. That's the year I went in there with the cameras. I think that first year of yours.
That could be. It definitely could.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. It was because we visited the camp. He came in there with the walker, 2003. That's when he got his second leg amputated. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, but I'm Mr. Rookie, so I was I didn't know anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
But it is something special, man. And you've been there through a lot of different players too. So.
I'll tell you one thing you realize right away, aside from the fact that just the magic of actually hanging out with these guys and hearing the stories. The stories are the best part. I got to tell you, playing ball is fun. I mean, at some level, this is about playing ball. But like every day, as you get more and more achy and sore, and maybe your hammy's all taped up and you're limping around, it's less about playing ball, and then it's just about hearing these amazing stories. You get the inside story on everything that you watched as a fan, and then you realize the amazing friendships that these guys had and the crazy stuff that happens when it's just a bunch of guys in their 20s basically living together for 9 months every year. And, they haven't made the other thing you realize is that they are at such a different level physically than you and your friends who were decent ball players, good, like I just remember one time, and it was my first or second camp. And Joe Pepitone, who probably at that point was maybe the age I am now or younger, probably younger than I am now, but maybe late 50s. And we had all been, taking BP and whatever else. And he goes out there, and they got Iron Mike throwing on one of the fields, and he just stands out there and just like bam, one after another. He hit about 5 or 6 home runs in a row, and it's an MLB field, man. And
those were big fields. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and all those even all that got bit, all those guys just they can all hit. Later just get up there and swing and start. My dad didn't do it because he had some health problems. But you're right, man. Those guys, it's a different level. I think any kind you get to the pros, right? And the pros that's when you people getting certain jobs. No, you can't fake it becoming a major leaguer. Put it that way,
Bittner hit a ball. I was pitching to Bittner in one of the big games. He hit a ball back at me, and I don't know how old Larry was at the time, but he was not a spring chicken. But he hit a ball so hard. Oh, and by the way, the hardest ball ever hit at me at baseball camp, at Randy's camp. Your brother. I was, I played third base most years.
Yep.
And he hit a ball. He scalded one, and it. I'm playing in the cutout, and he hits a ball that must have bent about. It had such an arc on it. He hit it with such force that the thing, you got your glove. It looked like I was coming toward my left ankle. Well, once that thing hit right off my shin, my right shin, and it felt like a baseball bat. And it was so funny. It bounced from there all the way to the fence. I have to go shag it.
Oh my God!
I have to go shag it. And Bull Durham's coaching third, and he says to me, "Hey, Carl." I'm like, "Yeah, Bull." He goes, "That hit all bone, didn't it?" I'm like, "I won't curse on your show, but yeah."
Yeah, you can.
Yeah,
man.
that did. That hit all.
Yeah, that
hit all bone, man. That hurt. Ronnie, I have a wealth.
Yeah, we could swing it. Ronnie could swing it. There's no doubt. I mean, that's the thing. It's like most people that go there, I mean, they got a little baseball in them, right? Yourself and, there's good teams. And I got to say, too, like you were talking about, it's like everything about the camp is fun, right? It's like literally you get in there and then playing the games are intense, okay? Everyone's out there to win, which is great. The competition's awesome. Mm-hmm. And then after, it's like even right when you crack a beer, when you're done, you're feeling great, and then you go to the hotel. And then even, we got Fridays. The Fridays is the teams go out to dinner, and the coach them out, and it's just everything about it, man. It's unbelievable week. I've been to more than a few, fortunately, and won a couple of championships. But then Ronnie and I started being placed on some really poor teams. No.
Oh boy. Yeah, I've been there.
I'm just kidding, but is there a tenure?
It happens.
Yeah. So how you guys picking the teams? Tell me about that. How
we're trying to balance them. First off, I want to say this: even though it is at some level what you're describing, in the middle of the game, teams really do try to win and all that. But the level of experience, this camp is for people who haven't played since Little League. And I've got guys who play D1 baseball, so I've got the range. And when you get there, you form a team, and the way we're balancing them though, Jeff, we have an intake form. When people register, they give us their level of play last time they've played, the positions they play. We make sure every team's got a certain amount of pitchers and catchers, and every team's got to have somebody who primarily wants to be a shortstop. So and then we mix the experience, the positions, and the ages. And for what it's worth, a majority of the guys coming to camp are people I know, people I've played with or against.
Right.
And so it's going to be pretty easy for me to kind of balance that out. And then the new guys, it's a little bit of a crapshoot, but I've been on the phone with all of them and kind of walked through like their experience level. And some of them are they're going to be stars, absolutely D1 stars, even though they're like 58 years old now. That talent doesn't go away.
No, it doesn't.
And then you got other guys who call up and they're like, yeah, I really want to go. I'm just afraid. I haven't played baseball since I was like 5 years old. I'm like, that won't matter. That won't matter. If you just love the game, that's what you need. You need to love the game. And this is men and women, obviously.
People don't understand, too, like who are listening and are thinking about going to the camp. Like Randy literally was the one that came up with the concept for it. So, I mean, it started with Randy Huntley. He and all the other teams did it, and he couldn't put a stamp on it. It's just the way it went. But if Randy didn't come up with this, I mean, he really gave a gift to so many people and other organizations. And you guys are following through with his legacy, which is beautiful, and it means a lot, man, because Randy started the whole thing. It started with the Cubs.
Yeah, if you got a minute, I got a little bit of a story here. So,
sure.
When recently I got Bob Surratt on GN interviewed me and Bob Dernier about camp, and it was so cool. But in getting ready for that, we found Bob Surratt had done this like a documentary back in like 1983, 84, where for GN, and he went to Randy's camp. It was one of the first ones. But what you realize
was the first one, yeah.
Yeah, so like it's Randy and a bunch of the 69 Cubs is pretty much the camp. Like your dad's in this. And they ran it. The original concept seems to have been a little different because they were a lot younger. They ran it like you were at Cubs spring training and you were going to be treated like a player at spring training, and they drilled the heck out of these guys. So, I'm watching this. It's like, wow, back then they really like made you like spend the morning doing drills, and they're doing all this coaching and drills. Well, it kind of got modified over time. And we have put a little bit of a different spin on it. And for us, we're taking the best things that we've always enjoyed out of camp, and we're enhancing those. And we're keeping all the traditions and what was best about Randy's camp. But it's not a drill fest. It's really just it's a celebration of baseball, friendship, and the Chicago Cubs, for lack of a better way to encapsulate that whole vibe. Because being a Cubs fan is a lot. I used to tell people, look, I'm not the skinniest guy you're going to meet, Jeff. I used to tell people, I actually am pretty skinny. I've just got thick skin. It's like 8 inches of scar tissue from watching the Cubs. It's like,
right.
That's all it is, man. It's like all the wounds, from 84 and you name it. I mean, 89.
You don't tell me, man.
03. Yeah,
69 left the lasting mark on our whole family, but and it continues. Yes. But hey, we won it in 16. But you look back at those days, the 69 Cubs, and where this whole thing did start from, were the 69 Cubs. And I was at that camp, the first one, and like you said, that everything went down that way. And I'm glad, they changed a little bit. I remember the first camp, some guys tried to throw at my dad, and so he started getting heated, so it was a little different, but it was still fun. And you could see like, this is something special happening here. Right. Man. And so, but to see the evolution of the whole thing, because I even went to the camps with Randy when he had it at Wrigley. I helped out a couple times when I just got out of college. And so to see where that went from was amazing. And I do think, what was cool too, man, the older we get, it's hard to get together with people you love that you grew up with or you were with in your earlier years or 20s. And same goes for these guys that played together. That's a family. On those 69 Cubs, Billy, my dad, and Ernie played together for how many? I mean, their whole careers. And at least, Billy and my dad and all those other guys were there for so many years. And to get all those guys back together, that means a lot for the players too. You could see it in them. Oh man, when they're there.
So we've got 6 guys from the '84 Cubs coming back together, and we may or may not have a few surprises thrown in. But 6 of the '84 Cubs are coming there to coach for the week. And these guys are super excited. They got together last summer. It was the 40th anniversary of the '84 Cubs. And they got together the weekend where they dedicated Ryan Sandberg's statue at Wrigley.
Right.
And we went out, Tony and I, Tony, who's putting this camp together with me, Tony Khan and I went out there and got to hang out with these guys, and to watch them together. They are just kids, man. I mean, they just cannot wait to be together. And Bob Dernier, who's been so helpful to me in putting this whole thing together, he's just like, he goes, you don't realize this is a gift you're giving to us too. We just all want to hang out together too. It's not just the campers, the players want to get back together too. So it's just like what you're describing with the 69 guys. That's important to these guys too.
It is, man. If you think about it, man, just in life in general, those guys that, playing in the pros, the top level, out there, and those are the days of their life. That's what they did. That's their legacy. And then to actually go and celebrate it is something big for those players and for the campers to get that vibe. It means something, man. That's special.
Oh, to watch them tease each other. And by the way, the way Lee Smith would always go at Randy. Randy had managed Lee a little bit in the minors. And just to watch the way these two guys would go at each other, a little bit was put on for us. But you could tell there was some deep resentment there too. That
definitely comes out, man. There's no doubt.
Yeah, there was some legit bitterness there. It was kind of cool to watch. Yeah. So,
well, you got to tell Tony, man. He might have to get me and Ronnie on his team because we won last time. Tony and I, we've been together a couple times on teams. We've done well. So
I know.
But we're going to be out there. My brother and I, we're going to be out there.
Fantastic.
So, looking forward to it. Now, let me ask you this. Okay, you grew up where in Chicago?
Oh, I grew up first in the Dundee area, and then I lived in Libertyville area, and then in Evanston.
Okay.
So kind of moved
around. And you went to You're a Northwestern grad, right?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah. What'd you study? Because I know you're big into the arts. We've talked about it. You're a music guy. What'd you study at Northwestern?
Yeah. Film. I was a film major.
You're a film
major.
major.
Was called radio, television, film. I did a radio show for 4 years, some TV production, but mainly I focused on film. So
you did,
I also did a lot of painting. Yeah, go ahead.
Wow, man. Okay, yeah, I remember us talking about that years ago. Thanks for bringing that back. But I could tell you're an artist, man, and you went and you became a lawyer, very successful one.
You know what happened there?
What made you make we've all got the direct change?
We've all got the left side, right side of the brain, and I was pursuing all art, basically artistic stuff. So I worked in the film business, I worked in special effects, got to work on some big movies like Predator and whatnot. Basically I was a low man in the special effects team, but I got to be part of some pretty big productions back in the 80s. Into the 90s, still working in that, but had moved mainly to just being a painter. I had a couple galleries representing me, and I was a painter. I had also painted back at Northwestern. So what it came down to is I was doing some painting. I was doing some freelance writing for magazines. I was still writing some short stories and whatnot, and some photography, some commercial photography, a little of this, a little of that. My wife just says to me at some point, and as you mentioned, also writing some songs. So she goes, "Hey, when you're doing like 8 different things, they're like hobbies, man. I could pick one and make a career out of it." So I looked at all of the things I was involved in, and I went with painting because I could control the whole production. This was before all the digital media, where you could really go and shoot a film on your iPhone if you wanted, right?
But seriously, I'm in the film business. So how far does that take you? I know, but it's still that's a struggle, no doubt about it. If you're doing it,
it's a struggle. But back then, we were buying film stock from Kodak up in Rochester.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Look, the amount of people you had to hustle to get get an editing suite. Just to put together to make a short film. The amount of money you had, the money and the favors that you had to beg, borrow, and steal to get, it was like a real, it was just a very difficult process.
Yep.
And having worked on so many friends' films, and that's what it'd be. It was all barter. hey, I'll give you a week. I'll work on your film. Then you got to come work on mine. And, you know, but nobody was making any money doing it. We were just trying to get ahead, right? It was just trying to hustle to try to get a reel together. So maybe you could get some funding and maybe you could do this and blah, 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 right? Meanwhile, I had special effects jobs and whatever else. So anyway, the painting. So there I am. We have our second kid. And I'm looking at my wife's on maternity leave, and she's talking about how many days until she goes back to, from maternity leave back to her career. And I'm starting to get all these pangs of like dad guilt and father guilt and all this like, hey, you know what? I love my art career, but I feel like I've got to just go do something that's going to give everybody options, the family options, my wife options, and I didn't know I was going to go be a lawyer for 30 years, Jeff, when I made that decision. But that's how it happened. And, you know, I left that career earlier this year, mainly to pursue this and also back into the arts and back into music.
There you go, man.
In fact, I've got a label going, and we're pretty close to going to press with our first record. So.
Right on, man. See, that's cool, man.
Yeah,
that's a
all,
cool story. That's a cool journey, man. Yeah,
that's a Chicago-based business as well. So that's pretty cool. Even though I live out in New Jersey, the music project and the baseball project both have a Chicago focus. So you don't leave your roots. You know, hometown is hometown. It's like. At the end of the day now, I'm chasing baseball and music, you know, which are,
I love it, right?
At the end of the day, the two things that have given me the most adrenaline rush in my life.
There you go,
and
man.
The things that, most make me feel, like you're walking not on the ground, but on some other level, have been those two, passions. So I'm building the next phase of my life around both of those.
Outstanding.
So,
outstanding, man.
That's a gift. I feel incredibly fortunate.
That is, man. That is. And two questions for you. And then I want you to give the address to where the email address where they can sign up. You still have people who can sign up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've got room. We've got basically enough for about another team and a half at this point. And then the camp's full. Yeah. Okay.
And you want to say where to email you real quick?
I would just go onto the website. They can email me if they want directly at just KMARQUARDT at Waveland Events. And that's Waveland just like outside of Wrigley, events.com. Or they can just go on the website, which is wavelandevents.com, and then just look for all the stuff about Northside Baseball Fantasy Camp. And there's a drop down, and it's got like about the camp, about the facilities, about the lodging. It talks all about the camp and the different packages. And obviously there's a way to contact us directly through that. And any of those contacts come right to my emails. So we jump right on it.
And what's your favorite baseball movie?
The one that just popped into my head, just because it was magic as a kid, was Pride of the Yankees.
Really?
So it just tugged at the heartstring. It just tugged at the heartstrings.
Okay.
The way Gary Cooper, and he was dying, obviously of Lou Gehrig's disease.
Yeah,
Lou Gehrig.
That was the heartstring one. There's no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, and it used to be on, way back, Fraser Thomas and W.
It did when we were kids. You're right. I could understand that. Okay, you're sticking with an old
family.
What a goodie.
Family classics.
Give me a modern day one now that you gave me the old one. Give me a modern day one then. Just quick.
Okay,
give me a modern.
I'll tell you this. I'm still tempted to get a new jersey made, put the Buttermaker on the back, because I am a Bad News Bears junkie from way back in the 70s.
There you go. All right. All right. Two good choices, man. And who's your favorite Cub of all time?
Growing up, it was all those 69 guys. Fergie, Billy, your dad.
All of them.
Okay. Yeah, but in the 70s, when I'm a teenager, Billy Buckner.
Okay. All right, I'll give you that. Yeah, I like Billy too. Yeah,
just that swing and that grit, and you could feel, you could hear his knees creaking as he ran.
Right.
And you knew what he was going through, and yet he was still, he won a batting title with the worst knees. He
could
hit.
He was a great hitter.
Fairly
hit, man.
crippled.
Yeah.
Kenny
Yeah.
Holtzman was a huge hero.
Oh,
I mean,
okay,
there's
cool.
there's been so many.
Yeah.
Obviously modern day, who wasn't, crazy for Rhino. I mean, but by then I was already in my 20s,
Yeah, but that was the kind of like our 20s, though. We were watching baseball in a very serious way, right? So those guys were kind of like, obviously me, it was different because I'm growing up in the clubhouse with the guys from '69, but that '84 team really, hit it for me, man, and my friends. We really dug.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they were great.
Yeah, but like I said, at that point, I'm already. It's that stuff that really hooks you. To me, the stuff that hooks you when you're, just wide-eyed and your world's a lot smaller, So you just absorb it.
I'm with you on that. When you said about hooked, Jose Cardinal hooked me up in the showers when he was on a team when I was a little kid. So you went to hook. I had to go to that one. So, me and Ronnie, it was a little different for me and Ronnie, right? So it's weird that way. But then it all ends, and then you're thrown out of there. But I get it, man. I get it, because even for us that grew up in it, it was a magical place to be, man. Yeah, no doubt about it. So these camps are magical too. So we'll end on that, man. Thank you for taking the time here, Karl. And I do want to say one last thing to you. Thank you for going out to my dad's Hall of Fame induction.
Oh, God, that was so cool when I ran into you there. You
that meant a lot.
Ran me over, I think, but it was amazing.
Yeah, it was great to see you, man, and it meant a lot.
Oh, God.
We talked, but we didn't talk so much, and but it was great to see all the people that came there. That was something else. And thank you for doing that.
That was so special.
Yeah.
So special. Yeah.
Right on,
I'm getting emotional thinking about that. That was really a special weekend. Yeah.
Well, I'll see you. We'll see you out there in Tucson. Okay. Looking forward to it. Tell Tony I said hello, man. I really looking forward to it. Okay, Karl.
All right, Jeff. Thank you so much, man.
You got it, man.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon. See you.
This podcast is brought to you by Bernie's Tap and Grill. It's family owned and operated since 1954. Located across from Wrigley Field on Clark and Waveland. My dad hit a few home runs on the Waveland Avenue, and Bernie's was my dad's favorite place to go. It's got delicious food, 4 full-service bars, an awesome beer garden, a sidewalk patio cafe, and a cool upstairs area. It's the place I've always met my friends at before and after games. Go on by and tell Linda Dillman Jeff Santos sent you. Bernie's Tap and Grill, where you go when you go to Wrigley.
Thanks for listening to our show. Special thanks to our cool crackerjacks, Scott Nelson, Jim McCauley, Debbie Foley, Sherry Matarisi, Terry O'Brien, Gary Tallman, Anne-Marie Piscule, Jim Muleschlegel, Liz Rutherford, and Mac McPhillamy.
Mac Attack. This show is made possible because of them and all our subscribers. If you want to support the show and be a cool crackerjack yourself, subscribe on our Patreon page. Click the link below this episode or go to the Patreon tab on our website, www.peanutspopcornandcrackerjacks.com.
Our long-term cool crackerjacks get a members-only t-shirt, so sign up now to be part of the club. To get notified of the next episode, click the follow button or sign up on Patreon for free.
And leave a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify.
And don't hesitate to write. Give us suggestions. Tell us how you're liking the show. Email jeff.ppcpodcast@gmail.com.
For my closing quote, I'm going to live till I die. Frank Sinatra.
Toodaloo. This Old Cub, the documentary about former 9-time All-Star third baseman, broadcaster, and Chicago Cubs legend Ron Santo and his lifelong battle with diabetes. Santo was the first major league position player to play professional baseball with type 1 diabetes, insulin dependent. This Old Cub captures the spirit of a man and his will to achieve. Santo is the ultimate optimist and therefore the ultimate Cub. Buy the DVD at santofilms.com. We also have t-shirts and other merchandise. Go to santofilms.com or santofilms.bigcartel.com.